Okay. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Sophia. Wonderful to see a new face coming here, and Jonathan. It's been quite a journey. We only started these videos 2-3 weeks ago, and this topic of Anthroposophia has grown very strong, I want to say, as we've developed, as we've been reading the riddles of philosophy. So what I wanted to do is to start by actually just reading a few statements made by Steiner in different contexts about the being of Anthroposophia, and what this presentation, or what I would like us to talk about today, is how we are seeing the development of a being that's been known about mankind since, well, probably at least 2100 BC. But there's a lot of material to cover here, and I would not be surprised if we need to have another one of this in the future. Anyway, let's go ahead and see the first quotes. So I'm just going to read them, and I want to see if it sparks any thoughts in you, Jeff, Sophia, or Jonathan. So in 1913, Steiner says, "After Sophia has entered human beings, she must take their being with her and present it to them outwardly, objectively. Thus, Sophia will be drawn into the human soul and arrive at the point of being so inwardly connected with it that a love poem as beautiful as Dante wrote may be written about her." That's from the Vita Nuova. The bit about the reference to Dante. Then another one from 1923. One of the things I have noticed is that Steiner really only talks about Anthroposophia Sophia in 1913 and 1923. That's the only stuff I found. And then obviously in the Riddles of in the Riddles of Philosophy, which is also completed in 1913, 1914. So something was going on there for him as well, which is of significance. So with the other quote, "Then Anthroposophy will appear to us increasingly as a living being, and we will become aware that something is knocking at the threshold of our heart, saying, 'Let me in, because I am yourself. I am your true nature, your very humanity.'" Anybody like to comment anything there before I move to the next slide, which is just two more quotes?
Yes, if I may just to mention, it was very interesting, the introduction you had: Sophia, philosophy, Anthroposophia, and that's wonderful to track. If Sophia, people experience this as a being, Sophia, outside, like the Shekinah, or so forth, in this ancient participation consciousness. And then we moved to a point where there was Philosophia, love of Sophia. So then it was not just like a god, sort of an awesome god outside, but it was something then people started to come into a relationship with, but in an intellectual way. It was a love for an idea, or ideas in a sense. And then you're intimating here with these quotes, we're entering a stage where it can actually be an anthropos Sophia, the human Sophia, in some wonderful way.
We're going to be digging deeper into that.
Sorry,
shall I go ahead?
Could I interject you? So the feeling that I get from this is that Sophia is the true essence that flows through all of the different evolutions or cosmogonies of Sophia. It's weird actually when you keep saying it, because my ears go, "Oh, you're talking about me," but then I realise you're not. But then Philosophia, so that would, to me, would be a stage in evolution, where the particular question that related to, or the riddle that related to Sophia, was to do with looking at Sophia and loving her in a mental way. I'm sort of guessing, and to me that seems quite Luciferic. And then the Anthroposophia is the next evolution after that, which is where Steiner says you'll see her, or whatever the being is, knocking at your door. And that to me seems to be more in the Ahrimanic realm, where we actually start to see her in the systems and manifesting sort of in that central space in the etheric realm. And so the question then is to my feeling, I've been writing a few poems around these sorts of areas, is that actually I think we're starting to come into a next realm. And so I actually think that Anthroposophia is going to be evolving into something else. And I've got some theories about that. But anyway, that's my first sort of thought from those quotes.
If I may jump in just from a introductory standpoint, just to complement those lovely descriptions. What the way I track this from an evolution of consciousness standpoint then is that Sophia, for the human being, represents not represents isn't the right word, is for nature is an indwelling wisdom at the level of the sentient soul. And then when Sophia said, we're going to have to figure out something else to call you.
Sophia M. We'll call her Sophia M.
When our Sophia said, the intellect in Lucifer, I thought, okay, well, this is the intellectual soul phase of consciousness evolution. And then when she said, there's another phase that Sophia, Anthroposophia, is, I would say, representative of, it's not the right word, is the future in the spirit self embodiment as the next phase of the evolution of consciousness out of the consciousness soul, which is how Anthroposophia dwells within us now as a self-conscious ego. Yes, so that land okay? So
are you suggesting, Jeff, instead of like Homo sapiens sapiens, there's Homo Sophians is the next?
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that. I mean, that's what Anthroposophy means, right? It's the indwelling wisdom. But
consciousness of our own humanity.
Yes, and yeah, and that being is the thing that stands behind life, not mechanical systems and that sort of thing. So I guess, go ahead.
I was going to probably just interject there. I don't want to broaden the scope, but I trawled through Steiner a few months ago, looking at the Divine Feminine, his Divine Feminine writings, and when he talks about the soul, he actually mentions Sophia as just one element of that soul, and so there's two other elements as well. So I just thought we might want to be conscious of that as well. So, I mean, even though our topic is Sophia, and so, and Sophia can expand, I think also we need to understand that as we talk about the soul, which is very divine feminine, that Sophia is one part of that, or one head of that. Yes, I just thought I'd mention that as well.
Okay, I'm going to throw in a curveball before we move to the next slide. Sophia is an incarnating being that started at the sixth hierarchy in the spirits of wisdom, and she's going to have 7 bodies, and we're going to be her 7th body. But all of that might make sense when we get a lot further into where we're going with this. So lots of interesting perspectives here. Really good. Okay, so let's just move to the next one, which is a couple more quotes. So, Anthroposophia is in herself an invisible human being who goes amongst visible human beings towards whom we have the greatest conceivable responsibility, who must indeed be regarded as an invisible human being. Feeling a bit like a double, isn't it? As someone with a real existence who should be consulted in all life's individual actions, to whom we are responsible in everything that happens. To be who are responsible in everything that happens is to be viewed in consultation with the human being, Anthroposophia, as a living being. And then finally, also from 1923.
Angus,
Yeah.
can I ask you a question? When was that written? That quote in the
Riddles of Philosophy. I think it was when he was writing the second part, i.e., in 1913.
So he added when he.
I think this is from the final chapter that we haven't read yet. That's
right,
my understanding.
I get it, but I just want to clarify then for Sophia and anybody else who might be listening that the second part is actually the first part of that book, and the last part is part of that second part. That's the first part of that book, right?
Yeah. It's confusing. Normally you start at the beginning of a book and write the end of the book at the end, but that's not what happened in the Riddles of Philosophy, is it? As we found out.
Okay. Thanks.
And then the next one, a feeling, a kind of sense that Anthroposophia, quite apart from the existence of an anthroposophist, I guess that would be, must be looked upon as an independent living being, as one, so to speak, who goes about amongst us and to whom we are responsible at every moment in our lives. Okay. Any further thoughts?
Yes, this is exceedingly radical to a standard Christian viewpoint, because the standard Christian viewpoint would be Christ is the one who we must consult at every moment in our lives, and for whom, but this is a bit different, because we are to be responsible for her, and I don't get that from the Christianity I've known, that we should be responsible for Christ, except in our actions. So anyway, yes, I think that is very interesting.
Let's try to come back to that question when we get to slide, I think it's about 13, 14. I'll give you a very quick preview of that slide.
Is that going to be Proverbs 8?
When we get to this one, Jonathan, ask that question again. Make a note of it, okay?
I was going to say, I don't know can you hear me? Proverbs 8. Yeah.
Can you remember it off the top of your head?
I've got it in front of me, but Steiner quoted it, that's all.
Oh, here you go.
Is it that one, Sophia?
The search for the new Isis, the divine Sophia, and the quest for the Isis, Sophia. Put wisdom's call in there, Proverbs. And essentially, Angus, those quotes that you had embody the essence of Proverbs 8. So I'm assuming Proverbs 8's in the Bible. I don't know.
It is, and it's also on your screen. There you
go.
This is where we're going next.
Good sign. Very good sign.
Sophia.
So what is going on here? First of all, we're going to try and the essence of what I'm trying to do here is like convey the idea that we're really talking about the biography of a being, just like we have biographies. And we'll go deeper into that as well. We really, a useful perspective on understanding what Sophia, Philosophia, Anthroposophia, it's the becoming of a being. And when we see the three names, we're seeing it in stages of development. So, so again, I'm going to read this, see if you've got any questions, and then I've got some material I'd like to add to this. Why I've put this slide in as the fourth slide here. Okay. So from Proverbs 8, which is in the Old Testament, of course, this is actually if you want, so I have more additional information. So actually, writings on the ground from the Greeks are actually fairly thin about Sophia. However, if you look at the Hebrews, they have a being that sort of like seems in essence to be the same as the Sophia of Plato and Stoicism. And that being's name is Shokma. And it's also very clear from this Shokma being that it's a feminine principle. And hopefully we're going to dig into sort of why is it feminine? Why is it not male? What's going on there? But we'll try to park that for one moment. So I was looking for texts that would somehow convey a sense of how ancient cultures, pre-Christian cultures, experienced this Sophia being. And this was probably the most representative of that text. So I'm going to read it to you and then we'll see where we are, okay? I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundary so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world, and delighting in mankind. Okay, over to you guys.
Stunning, really, that she's not credited in classical Christianity to the extent that this suggests she should be.
I've got a question on this, I suppose. Like, she's at his side. That to me, when you say someone's by their side, like as a consort, as a wife, or actually, or maybe as well as counsel. So, darling, put that bit of ocean over there. You can see it. Moving house. No, don't put the couch over there. So yeah, I'm just trying to sort of imagine the by the side. The other thing that really grabs me is the filled with delight day after day, rejoicing. It just feels to me like when you've grown an absolutely beautiful garden or a gorgeous child, who's just started to play violin. That deep love. So to me, Sophia seems to have an essence of love and care. And it seems to me to be more of a family sort of love, that she actually feels that this is her home and these are her children and these are she's helping to create these and she's super proud of them. So that would be my feel from this.
Yeah, I think that as well, and I also think, or I wonder if there's a sort of a double thing going on, and I'm not sure if I'm just being confused in my mind, but something in me wants to say that she's also the creation. So the creation that is being created is delighting in its being created.
Okay. Jeff, did you want to add something then before I round off this slide?
No? There's nothing to add. I'm in love with this picture.
Just one thing. Just to go back to the ancient Jewish kind of mythology or whatever it is. So Ein Sof sends the woman out, or the female spirit that calls into the dark and asks the questions of what needs to be instantiated in the cosmos. And then she calls back up to him and says, send me down these things that I need. So I get that essence from that as well, that she's sort of going, come on, send me these down, and so that I can then work with whatever you send down to co-create those. So as Jonathan said, that sort of brought to me that sort of more ancient Jewish religious text.
Okay, I think
I just quickly want to add, sorry, that straight after I said what I just said, I also feel like I should say, but in that same picture, that it's more a picture of kind of like a lovemaking where each side of the partnership is being made at the same time. It's not just a sort of a one-way thing.
Well, I'm going to speak to what Sophia, our Sophia, was talking about there. I thought it was very interesting, your description, because one of the ways of understanding this being is exactly as you describe it. It's looking upwards and it's looking downwards. So if we can remember, I should have put an image of this to flash up on the screen, but we might be well versed in it enough. If we think, if these are the spirits of wisdom, then above the spirits of wisdom are the thrones, the cherubim and the seraphim, higher hierarchies, and then below we've got the dynamis, and we've got the exousi, and then we've got archangels and angels. So if Sophia, wisdom, is the being of wisdom, and we see her as her highest being, as being quite literally the spirits of wisdom, then she has a receiving, perhaps you could even call it more feminine, in an earthly way. I mean it purely in an earthly way in this particular context, as a receiver of higher impulses from seraphim, cherubim, thrones, but the giver of impulses to beings lower than herself, which go all the way down the hierarchies. And that image that you just gave our Sophia here, it's like resonates very strongly with that. I don't know if you feel that when I'm describing it.
I think Joseph Campbell or Blavatsky would say that if you go high enough, they all kind of conjoin all of these types of myths. So it wouldn't surprise me, and I really appreciate your expertise in Steiner's works to be able to augment that understanding. And yeah, that feels right to me.
Okay. So one of the things also I think that I think is important to integrate here is to remind ourselves to remember that when we're talking about the Greeks, especially from the Riddles of Philosophy, we are talking about a consciousness that saw thinking, and it's the beings that are behind appearances were real to them, and they appeared separately. They didn't need clothes, physical clothes. Okay, so let's try and unpack that a little bit and bring it into a modern day experience. When we see somebody's face, if we see somebody smiling, if we see somebody crying, if we see somebody laughing, we are obviously aware that there is a being there that is having some type of emotional reaction to the environment. We don't separate them out. It's like the one is the expression of the other. The outer is the expression of the inner. What is a lot more difficult for modern consciousness to get hold of the idea of is that bit which is experiencing the happiness or the sadness that's sort of like expressed on the face can actually live a separate life. It is not dependent on the face to express itself. It chooses to express itself on the face. And this for me is an image of one way of looking at what Greek thinking was. There was an ability to actually see directly the being that was creating the outer manifestation of the world. So I think one way to synthesize that idea into a simple but meaningful sentence would be, the world is a gesture. And then it becomes a gesture of what? Where is that gesture? And the Greeks, they could also see that. They could see the being behind that gesture. And when we read something like Proverbs 8, I think it's useful, although difficult for our modern day consciousness, to really assume that this being was actually experienced, speaking these words to a well, it would be a Hebrew soul here.
I have a question, and actually I have a statement, and then a question. But I forgot what the statement was, so I'll ask that. How does this relate, this being the divine feminine, say, to Pherecydes and Pythagoras and the three mothers? I mean, I know how it relates in the way you were just describing it, but what is the identity of these three mothers, right? They are three aspects of nature. They're not three aspects of intellect, right? They're the way in which the world was being experienced with in every individual soul, but not as wholly isolated or independent. And then we see in Riddles of Philosophy that Heraclides takes one element, one mother, fire, and that part of the soul really grasps him, and that gets developed individually. So I'm wondering how they saw, or what is the identity of these three mothers? Is this the threefold Sophia? I'll leave that as the question.
So, and that question, Jeff, write it down. When we get to the Hebrew slide, then we'll really dig into it. Okay. Yeah. Because I've got some possible answers there.
So I just wanted to say as well, Angus, that you may be aware that the beginning of Ovid's Metamorphoses starts very similar to this.
No, tell us, please inform us.
Yes, that's right. So it pretty much starts with divine energies that come into the cosmos, and they see all of these particles floating around in the cosmos, and they talk about unswimmable seas, unbreathable air, and so forth. And it's almost like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, where he sort of does this on the screen and puts everything into the right place so that in the right order it will work. In the wrong order it won't. In the right order it will. Now, Ovid was a little bit of I'd say a little bit of a whistleblower, and or somebody that was persona non grata in the Roman Empire, and so he was sent out into the deepest, darkest, I don't know, Romania or somewhere like that, and Augustus wouldn't let him back in. And I actually think it's this way of thinking that wasn't very welcome in the Republic. And so I just really wanted to put that in because it is a different way of thinking, and it's a way of thinking that encourages us to look behind appearances. And my view is just from being an ancient historian that perhaps that wasn't really welcome in the Roman Republic. So I just wanted to sort of put that in as well. It's probably a little bit off tangent, but it's very, very similar. Wow. The way that this is phrased is very similar to the Metamorphoses.
Thank you for bringing Ovid in, and Metamorphoses, as you say. First of all, it makes me think of Goethe's Metamorphosis, and then it makes me think of biosemiotics. And then that was a statement I wanted to make. This is a proper metaphysics for biosemiotics. Steiner provides an epistemology for biosemiotics, I think. or what Goethe was working on, complex theory, all the things we know today as bioemergence and that sort of thing. But this is a proper metaphysics for, I would say, semiotics, and I look forward to developing it with you all.
Absolutely, and in about 3 slides' time, we'll be digging. We're going to try and dig into that as well. What you're mentioning there, because this idea of metamorphosis is, I believe, absolutely key to understanding what this being is, Anthroposophia. Good, interesting intuition there, Jeff. So, final summary on Sophia. What is Platonism, Socrates, or Socrates? What are they standing for? They are seeking the truth. They are seeking the good. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, a little bit of an introduction here, and then there'll be a little text, so like on the next slide. Berthius, his consolation of philosophy. What is it? A brief overview, and then again, just like hand it over to you guys. So this is a remarkable story. We've got this very oh gosh, where do I start? There are so many interesting angles to this guy. So he wrote the Consolations of Philosophy whilst he was waiting to be executed. Up until for most of his life, he was a very successful scholar, but he was more than a scholar because he slightly had a practical life in the court of Theodoric, and we're in the period like 470 to 520 AD approximately here. But one of the most salient things prior to him sort of like being locked up for saying unsavory things, for being perhaps a whistleblower as well, was that he was a translator of the texts of Aristotle and Plato into Latin, and he was extremely competent, but most importantly, well versed in these two aspects of Plato and Aristotle. This in itself is highly significant, and I think it will be going forward. So anyway, this guy, he's been a poet like his life, and he's been inspired by the muses to write all of this poetry. Then he finds himself on the bad side of Lady Luck, about to be executed, and he has this vision where Lady Philosophy basically storms into his room and says, "Get it together, man. Think about your life, and I'm here to help, but you need to really wake up to why you are in this position." And there's several interesting things that happen in the beginning here. First of all, we've got Lady Philosophy enters into them. We can imagine he's bawling his eyes out about thinking, "Oh, woe is me," and it's like all these wonderful verses. It's like self-pity. It's written all over his face. Lady Philosophy comes in, and she says, "Do you want some help?" I really do encourage you to read these conversations, because they are a lot deeper. I'm presenting them in a fairly superficial way. So there's so much to much more to what I'm saying here if you actually go and read the text. But anyway, so Lady Philosophy says, "Get it together," and she tells the muses who've been entertaining his mind all these years, "Get out of here. There's no place for you in here." And they obey. they get out of the room. And one of the first dressing downs he gets is, look, Boethius, you're feeling all this self-pity because Lady Fortune has decided that you are, how can I put this? You're no longer worthy of her attention. She's Lady Fortune is like notoriously fickle. You've placed all your happiness in her, and you've had a good, rewarding life. But now you realize that she is exactly that. She's a fickle lady, and you're lamenting your situation. And she begins to start describing to him how basically he's forgotten the wisdom that he had gained by studying Aristotle and philosophy. And this comes out so that there's on the hem of the dress of Philosophia, there's pi and theta, practice and theory. There are references in there which indicate this. So she says, look, if you really are interested in getting better, you've got to sort of forget the muses and you've got to rededicate yourself to truth, which is what you used to do when you were doing these translations. And most salient for this particular presentation is the fact that this was definitely experienced as a living being talking to him. And I'm going to move to the next text, and I'm going to move to the text now and just read a little bit of that. It's like how he introduces when Lady Philosophy appears to him in the room, and this is just the beginning. Okay. So Boethius, while he's sitting in his cell waiting to be executed, he writes, "While I was pondering thus in silence and using my pen to set down so tearful a complaint, there appeared, standing over my head, a woman's form, whose countenance was full of majesty, whose eyes shone as with fire, and in the power of insight was surpassed the eyes of men, whose colour was full of life, whose strength was yet intact, though she was so full of years, and none that would ever think that she was subject to such age as ours." Yeah, going to hand it over to you guys and see if there's. Oh, Sophia, I just saw you just like disappeared. You're back in again now. Sorry. Any comments on the last two slides?
Yeah, this the character of personal visitation really makes me wonder what that would be like. With Boethius, it sounds like it came, maybe you could say, through the power of karma, through his particular. It wasn't it was unwarranted by him. He didn't kind of aim towards it. It just happened. But the books we're studying is, in a sense, we're trying to. I don't know exactly how that character is going to appear, but we're trying to help that character to appear.
To me, this really sings of Osiris and Isis. So I think in somewhere Steiner talks about Sophia being a transformative force. So you encounter her on your death, or when you're being. I think Jeff, you talked about initiation in the last podcast. So it's like a mini death in the middle of your life. And to me, this feels like he's on death. You know, he's literally on death row, And he might as well be dead. And she comes in and says, put your ego aside. This is time to grow up, be a real strong man, and let me help you transform. I will be your womb for transformation. So yeah, to me, this sort of feels like a sort of an Isis moment. So taking him into the next realm. That's just my intuition.
One of the observations, I think Lady Philosophy also reminds her. I'm not sure to what extent I'm integrating something else that somebody has like said around this, but Socrates, who also loved Sophia, he died. Obviously, there was no pain and suffering for him because he was already he was so certain of his essential being that death was just like a transitional phase. And I think if Lady Philosophy scolds him and reminds him that if you had a bit more about you, if you had really read Aristotle and Plato, then you would be in the same position as Socrates was, that you would sort of like say, well, yeah, okay, I've got to do this. I wouldn't be wallowing in self-pity here. But I think you've also brought in another interesting aspect there, Sophia, in that the contrast between Isis, which could only be seen when you were about to die, or so like after death, actually, in the Egyptians. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's my understanding of it. And here we've got the first indications of being able to see it while still alive. And for me, that's an indication of a development of the being of Isis, Sophia, Philosophia. That's something, the relationship to mankind itself is changing. I don't know if you would like to add anything to that one.
It's a bit. I kind of like to ask if anyone, but it's a very. I don't want to ask it because it's a very private thing. But because of what you're saying, it seems that it could be something that could be done in the right sort of context to ask people's experiences of Sophia in their lives.
Okay, this I'm going to share. This isn't something personal, but something that happened to me yesterday. Because this type of thing is engaging all my thinking and emotional life at the moment in a very positive way. So I go for a sauna regularly on a Saturday morning. I chuck myself in a freezing cold lake because that's my idea of fun. And one of the people there, I'm reading these lectures and I'm reading about Boethius and all these type of things. But there's one guy who I do have interesting conversations. As far as I know, he's never heard of Steiner, basically, and he doesn't know. But he's shown an openness in conversations that is, it's rare. At least for me, that's my experience in life, is that it's quite rare. Anyway, so I asked him, have you ever had any? Have you or anybody you know had any invisible friends? Because children often have invisible friends. So coming back to your point there, Jonathan, I think it's very difficult to go and ask people if they've had experiences of Sophia, but there are experiences a lot closer to home. And this guy, it's like regular guy, goes to the sauna. He was able to give me like a couple of experiences, a personal experience of something that was, not sure what's going on here. It could just be ghosts, but also of his daughter about an experience. And then he started talking about feeling the presence of a person that had died sort of like a few years ago. And what was interesting in the way he was talking about this is that he was treating them as real. He couldn't find an explanation for them in his own worldview. And he very rarely could he find people to talk to about these type of things, but nevertheless, they were real experiences for him. And I think this is particularly interesting because what I see, one of the essential ingredients for developing a relationship with this being, but also with ourselves as individuals, is a deeper penetration into the inner life, our thinking, feeling, and willing, rather than attaching it to objects outside us. Or so like thinking, it's like that, you know, that new car that I just bought, that's what happiness is. No. Happiness is the feeling that lives in you, and you have transferred it onto the car that is outside there. And if you want to, this is what Philosophia is telling Boethius about in this book, The Consolations. He's saying, you're completely, you're off your rocker. Come on, guy, wake up. That feeling that lives inside you. And if you think it's really is like that car or that house or whatever, it's like the modern equivalent would be, then you are gigantically deceiving yourself, because real happiness comes from the truth and the beautiful and the good.
It's also deeply, deeply personal. And no longer is Sophia entering through a vertical relationship, but it's also now the horizontal relationship of human beings with each other, us sitting here. Pretty amazing, actually, if you think about it, from all around the globe. But this also speaks to then, if Sophia is so personally and deeply personally available to all of us, only through the individual personal, what do you say, inhabiting the personal, inhabiting the soul as a real phenomena, does dialogos actually work then? You know, is it, Vervaeke speaks about dialogos, John Vervaeke, the cognitive scientist, psychologist, but only from a psychological sort of bound standpoint, right? And so if she's among us, then we must access her in the most deeply personal way with each other. Yes.
Have you not also noticed it feels, I mean, it's late here, it's dark, but I've got goosies as I'm hearing Jeff talk. And I feel as we're talking that we're actually talking with a degree of awe and respect, almost like she's here. And that we really just want to understand her. I mean, that's how I feel from just listening to the discussion. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was I wrote a lot of poems recently about Moloch, you know, the Ginsberg Howl poem, and the egregore, and that's something that's really come into the collective conscious, or consciousness, whatever. And so I would say that Sophia is, whatever the manifestation at the moment, is something, Jeff, that is actually complexly interconnected, and that she may knock on everybody's cell door, but I actually think that she's getting closer and closer to the firmament, and so we can all kind of hear her knocking, even though it's all individually within our hearts, but there is something there that we're all saying, yeah, we can hear something right now and we have to pay attention.
Okay, I'm going to round off that slide with a couple of thoughts before we move on to the next slide. One of the things I might not have stressed enough when Boethius is talking about his relationship, or what Lady Philosophy is saying to him, is she's saying, reason is the only way you're going to liberate yourself. So it's thinking. Your thinking, your ability to think clearly and rationally, reasonably, is what's going to save you. And I think this is key here, because in there are a couple of paths to initiation knowledge. I'm simplifying hugely here. I'm talking specifically within like anthroposophical thinking. There's the practices for in knowledge of the higher worlds, but actually Steiner is very consistent in saying that it's like a true understanding of the philosophy of freedom is, if you like, the risk-free path. It doesn't make it any easier, but the penetrating the freedom of philosophy, if you are able to, he says at the end in the 12th lecture about John, he says, if you like a what do they call symphony leaders? They don't call them as what do they call them? The conductor. Yeah. If you as like a conductor can repeat, perform, it's like the essential gestures in thinking in the riddle in the philosophy of freedom, then you have done all the preparation necessary for that act of grace to be able to happen. And for me, the parallel here is with what Berthius is telling us about a lady philosophy here, that reason thinking is a means of salvation, the means of salvation. That's the link. And that what this actually means, that the modern initiatory path, its first step is study, the study of a worldview where the spirit is not treated as epiphenomena of material, but it is something that is real and of itself. It's essential. Yeah,
that's a very deep depth you're entering there. Quick alert is that a later edition of our videos will go into some ways in which can help with that study you mentioned of the philosophy of freedom, how to grasp the symphony of it and be able to conduct it.
Yeah. Something to look forward to in the future. Yeah. Okay. And Sophia, Jeff, did you want to come back at anything before we move to the next slide?
Just that not only reason in relationship to the spirit, but also reason as relates to the soul, and the understanding the difference that theirs is extraordinarily important, I do believe, so that the soul can be prepared as a vessel, or is a vessel and is being prepared. So I would just leave that there.
Or you said something that leads on to something that I forgot to say, but I think is also important in this context, is that I don't know if you remember Matt in the Footnotes to Philosophy group. He mentioned a conversation he'd listened to with an Australian lady, Dawn, ? Hugely interesting conversation. And one of the aspects that she brings up there is how the addictions that we have nowadays, the addictions that everybody in the world is sort of like battling with, are a type of karma loka. they are where we are trying to purify our souls. And reason also becomes an essential tool in that, managing to gain control over the impulses that are like affecting our desire life. So I think there's an intimate connection there between, to what you're saying, to the content of this talk, Jeff. That actually, that in itself is hugely interesting. The battles that the world's confronting.
Sophia, I would strongly encourage you to read the Riddles of Philosophy. It's an unbelievable process of discovery of the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of the soul itself. Right up now, we're right into natural science. But just before natural science, we're dealing with Hegel. And it's clear that Hegel had some initiatory experience like this at that level, but then receded from the personal, the need to uptake the personal, the deeply personal, and in his sort of fourth problem, dissolves the soul into the spirit, which is the wrong direction to go. Right. So, and then we're going to move that group into the philosophy of freedom, which is then putting an epistophenomenology underneath all of this, which is, I think we're heading in a pretty special direction.
Okay. Whilst you were talking, Jeff, I managed to look up. There's this lady. She's an English lady who lived in Australia for. No, she's an Australian who lived in England for a long time and moved back to Australia. Her name's Dawn Langman, Langman. There's an interview with her on SoundCloud. Really, really interesting from lots of perspectives. But she unpacks what I've tried to intimate here with addictions in a stunning way. So I can really recommend that. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So we're at Anthroposophia. So as you can see, this is blank. So what's going on here? I think what we've done is we're left with a riddle. We've got to know, as through looking back in history, what this Sophia, Philosophia being, the fact that it is a real being, as something, an idea that we've played with here. It's more concretely, we've tried to find examples of how it's reflected itself in culture. And then we've got this idea that, well, Sophia, Philosophia, and Anthroposophia are the same being, but they're not the same being. Anthroposophia is an evolution of the previous two, and in the same way that Philosophia herself was an evolution of Sophia. I think this is one of the key thoughts that we can play with based on what we've been looking at. I do want to, I'm just pointed out here, this book by Prokofiev, The Heavenly Sophia and the Being of Anthroposophia, has been one of my main go-tos with most of the material that's going to come after that introductory bit there. And the images, these spectacular images, all come from the Eastern Cupola in the Goetheanum. And whilst they aren't in themselves in any way an answer to what is Anthroposophia, if I zoom out a little bit of those images there, you can see, let's actually have a look. So you've got Ich, I here. That's actually the same image up here and the same image here. But if we come out, you see this is that same I being here. And in this Coppola image from the Goethe Arnhem, we've got some magical things going on. We've got the different epochs that mankind has moved through in its own development here, and these are represented in these different figures, and it's way beyond the scope of what I am able to do. So, like, to give a nice overview of what's going on in these pictures, but again, I think it feels like it's something that I want to dig into at a later stage, because if we look at these beings the whole time, we've got beings behind beings here. We've got in this picture, we're continually presented with these higher beings overshadowing lower beings, and this is like the process of time moving through here. And yeah, I haven't got much more to add to that, other than perhaps referencing a guy called David Hafner, who does a very interesting video on YouTube, Hafner, who I think is the 9th video in his series there, where he talks a little bit about some of the key dynamics going on in this picture. But for me, it represents when we try to grasp humanity, the same problems that we meet there are the same type of problems that we confront when we're trying to look at, so like, what might this Anthroposophia being be? It's that bigger question. Yeah.
As I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about Ovid and the Minority Report again, and it's like, as human beings, we have parts within ourselves, but also, and I think even like in an Egyptian like myth, that the soul has 9 different elements in it, and then we're also part of something that's bigger, many different things that are bigger. And again, if like Minority Report, if you put them together in the right way, you get a person that is a real person, and not a parasite, and not trying to kill people, and not, frustrated, and all those things that Jordan Peterson talks about. And to me, like, I could see this as a screen, and it's like, this is the puzzle. Now let's put all these pieces together so that things work well. So it's almost like Proverbs 8, where he's creating the ocean and everything else. But now it's actually creating from a map of humanity rather than the natural world.
Yeah. And in this picture, you've got the history of mankind, but also the spiritual impulses that are sort of like those invisible things that are behind the gestures, which you really get a sensation for this in these flowing colors, and so it's sometimes stark contrast, like the eye here, the blue, so like in this ocean of red and orange and yellows and that type of thing. In itself, it's like it creates these really interesting experiences.
Sophia, would you say more about the creating out of, instead of nature, say, or whatever nature is, because part of what I'm getting here is that this is a medium in which these beings are swimming, and that there's possibly reciprocitous relationship going on in this evolutionary process, or in this developmental process, or in this living engagement process. Would you say more about what you're thinking of, as relates to that step?
Yeah, it sort of came to me as I sort of looked at this picture. I thought, if I was a demiurge, I have this demiurge to sort it all out and put it all in order so that it works well. But it also, as you were asking that question, Jeff, I suppose that the thing that came to me was the Christ impulse. So you've got all of these parts, but it's actually holding them in the right order and holding them apart, and saying, look, you do this bit and you do that bit, and don't you start crossing boundaries, because that's where all things are going to go wrong. I don't want to sound like Plato, like I'm trying to organize, a perfect city. But to me, it does seem a little bit like Anthroposophia is the question of what it is to be human. And, Philosophia is the question of what do we know? How do we know? So it's kind of the next sort of metaphysical question on from that. And so you can see, maybe the Philosophia, there was some demiurge going along saying what's reason and what's logic and what's rhetoric, and putting them all in order. And now this is the next pane of glass that's got a different question and a different puzzle to be solved.
One of the things that Prokofiev in his book says is actually Anthroposophia is actually an insufficient translation to call it wisdom of the human being. It's exactly the phrase that you used there, Sophia. It's a consciousness of our own humanity that's going on here, according to Prokofiev. And one of the, I'm not sure how I made the link, and I might remember it whilst I'm describing it to you guys, but there was somewhere along the lines that, yeah, that's it. So if Anthroposophia is our true being, I was thinking about it in the terms of friendships. It's like, what is a true friend? It's like and that can be described in so many different ways. But I was reminded of the passage in John 15, where he makes. I've actually got it. I've managed to find it. Where he says to his disciples, this is after he's been betrayed. He's just about to make the prayer to God, sort of like saying that I've done everything you asked me to do. He's still with his disciples just before they go to the Garden of Gethsemane. That's right. So Christ says, you are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. And one of those 4 quotes that we read right at the beginning of this presentation, one way of understanding those is trying to develop the type of relationship you have to a friend, to this invisible being. And yeah, that's about as far as I got with the thought. We've got to, first of all, we've got to believe that it's something real, and then we've got to start to begin to ask ourselves the question, well, what do we do to try and enter into a deeper relationship with this being? And I think that's one of the reasons why I dug so deeply into Boethius this week, because it's like, historically, it's the clearest expression of somebody coming into direct contact with that being.
I'm inspired to speak a little bit about cohesion. Sophia mentioned the Christ impulse, and obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but to have a personal relationship with the Christ is a daunting thing, right? And I think of the moment that is it Pontius Pilate asks the Christ, "Are you the Messiah?" and Christ's response is, and I've always have trouble conveying what I think it means, but is no, basically you are. We all are. I am is the Messiah, and you have to be able to say, I am the Messiah, because you are wisdom, you are Sophia, you are cuckoo cachoo. Right.
Where does that word come from? I was in a song there, Jeff, when you said that, and I know you make references to song. Cuckoo,
Yeah,
choo.
the Beatles.
Oh, that's right. Yes, from the
Walrus.
Magical Mystery Tour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just sort of leapfrogging a little bit off what Jeff said. When he started to say it was daunting, it made me think of Ernest Becker's Denial of Death. And then looking back at this, it does look a little bit hellish, doesn't it? It looks like the characters are made of flames. And to actually sort of ask yourself the question, who am I? What am I made of? How do I fit together? Am I fitting together in the right way? Do I have the right parts? And again, this is the whole Osiris thing of, and the divine feminine is meant to find all the bits and put you together properly and then cook you and transform, or cultivate you and transform you, which is terrifying. And looking at this, you could, it's a lovely picture, but you can imagine being faced with that view and it being very terrifying. And so maybe Anthroposophia is quite a daunting prospect, and not one that a lot of people want to encounter.
Exactly. I think because as Jeff was saying, is the case, and it's also the case that your friend can be the Messiah to you if you let them.
Yeah, it takes that kind of vulnerability, doesn't it?
I think it's more than just vulnerability, but it's
well, the openness, vulnerability, a vessel for.
No, you're right. Because it's giving them the power in a sense,
and it's understanding that we're in this together. Like, so here we are. These are, as Sophia was talking about, I was reminded that I got a lot of the feel goods right now, and it's been a beautiful conversation. And this is the incarnating into death we're talking about, and it's a terrible, terrible prospect that there's no way around. As a initiatory experience.
Yeah. I'm thinking about where you are, Sophia, in Oz there, and this is our next slide, which takes us into this evolution aspect that Jeff hinted at earlier, and I was wondering if it might be. We've been going now for an hour and a quarter. Whether it might be a good place to stop and pick up later, because the next several slides are really developing and deepening into this. It's the evolutionary aspect of this being. I don't know. But where are you in your? When's Betty Buy's time?
Oh, it's 11:20 now.
Yeah, I would appreciate regaining energy before we enter the next phase.
I think that is wisdom.
Yeah.
Entering the
well, we've created quite a bit to digest, haven't we?
It's been wonderful, Angus. Thank you so much.
Yes, Angus, thank you for putting this together and putting us on the ground together.
Thank you for being part of it. That is fantastic. The most important bit.
You, Angus.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
And Jonathan and Jeff too.
Yeah. Thanks to everyone.
All y'all.
So we'll have to. We've just got to go ahead and set a date for the next time. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. I hope you'll join us, Sophia.
I'd love to.
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Cool. Okay.